Hey everybody, Mr. Buckle here with problems number 1 and 2 from your Chapter 9 and 10 practice test. We have problem 1 up on the screen here where we are given the quadratic equation b squared minus 14b plus 49 equals 6, and we are asked to solve this quadratic equation by rounding our answer to the nearest tenth. First thing I notice about this quadratic equation first is that it is quadratic because we have a variable squared. Second thing I notice about it is that it is not equal to 0, so we cannot use the quadratic formula the way that this equation is set up. So what I need to do is I need to make this 6 a 0 because we want to have our quadratic equation equal to 0. In order to make this a 0, I have to subtract 6 on both sides of the equation. So I'm going to subtract 6 on both sides of the equation, and when I do that, what I get is b squared minus 14b plus 43. This is a 43 now because we subtracted 6 on both sides, and that 6 comes from the 49, and the 6 on the other side goes away and it becomes a 0. Now we are in a position to be able to use the quadratic formula to solve this quadratic equation. If we're going to use the quadratic formula, we have to find the values of a, b, and c. And a, b, and c are the coefficients of the certain terms in the quadratic equation. A is the coefficient of the squared term, the squared variable, which is b in this case. B is the coefficient of the single term, just b. And c is the value of the constant without a variable at all, which is 43. So our a, b, and c in this problem is a is 1 from right here, b is negative 14 from right here, and c is 43 from right here. And one thing I want to point out is that this b here is not the same thing as the b in the equation. These are two very different things, and to clarify that, or to maybe clear that up, you could just easily change the b in the equation to an x or an m or any other variable. So this b here is not the same thing as the b in the equation. The b in the equation is the variable we are trying to solve for, and this b is the coefficient of this variable here. So we have our a, b, and c. We're going to use the quadratic formula now to solve for b in the original equation. So we're going to plug these in to the quadratic formula, where our variable is going to equal, excuse me, negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2 times a. So that's what I have here. That's what I have right here. So I have 14 plus or minus the square root of 14 squared minus 4 times 1 times 43 divided by 2 times 1. So I'm going to do some simplification here. I'm going to do negative 14 squared. I'm going to subtract 4 times 1 times 43. So I'm going to clean this up a little bit here. And upon doing that, I get 196. The 196 comes from negative 14 squared. Negative 14 times negative 14 is 196. And then the 172 comes from 4 times 1 times 43. So that's where this 172 comes from. And then the 2 down below comes from the 2 times 1. This is where the mistakes are going to happen, right in here. When we do this simplification here to get from here down to here, that's where those mistakes are going to happen. Most often it's going to happen with this sign. So be very careful when you are simplifying what's in underneath the square root symbol, because that's where the mistakes are going to happen. So just kind of do that a step at a time, as I did here. That's how I do it, just to kind of make sure that I'm doing everything right. And if I do make a mistake, it can be very obvious or easier to find where that mistake is. So now I'm going to do 196 minus 172, and that is the square root of 24, or that is 24. So I'm going to take the square root of 24. So I have 14 plus or minus the square root of 24 divided by 2. Now I have to evaluate the square root of 24. I don't know what the square root of 24 is, so I have to get a calculator to do that. And I'm going to round that to the nearest tenth because it's not a perfect square, and we get 4.9. It's approximate 4.9. So we have 14 minus 4.9, and then we have 14 plus 4.9. That's where this plus or minus now is going to break off into two answers, because technically there are two square roots to 24. It's negative 4.9 and positive 4.9. So that's where our two answers come from. So now I'm just going to simplify each of these things. 14 minus 4.9 is 9.1 divided by 2. I'm going to simplify this over here. 14 plus 4.9 is 18.9 divided by 2. I'm going to divide each of these things by 2. 9.1 divided by 2 is 4.6. 18.9 divided by 2 is 9.4, and I put 9.4. It's actually 9.55. I put 9.4 there because, or 9.45, because on our answer sheet, 9.4 is the applicable answer, and 9.5 or 45 is what we get, and it's just a round to the nearest tenth, which then our answer wouldn't be there. So these are rounded here. These are rounded. If this was not a multiple choice test, it might be a little bit more, not obvious, but okay to put 9.45. But since it is multiple choice and the answer we're getting here when we actually do this division does not show up as one of the answers, we pick what's very close to that. So we have 9.4 and 4.6 are the solutions to this quadratic equation.